Hi, I'm Rachel, and I'm here to do my June 2020 page 112 tag. I literally just returned from my partial weekend in Baltimore for Father's Day, and as soon as I could, I plunked down in front of this camera because I'm so excited to make this video. Probably speaks a lot about my need for more spontaneity in my reading, because I look forward to making this video all month. The page 112 tag was started by Sean the Book Maniac a couple of years ago based off of a literary prize, and the point is to assess a work, usually a fiction, by no more and no less than the quality just on page 112 without any other context. That being said, I am using this prize to whittle down books I already own, so I might have knowledge or preconceived notions that always cloud my thinking, but you do what you can do. I'll link to last month's video down below, but basically the way I play this game is that I pick 3 books from my shelves that are on pieces of paper in this handy dandy Books and Cats mug. I read page 112 from each of the books and then decide which of the 3 will join my June TBR. The titles in this mug are all acquisitions from December 2019 or earlier, and there's already too many in here as it is, so I'm glad to be whittling it down. So here we go with book number 1. Already having some technical difficulties as some of these papers get stuck together, but here we go with book number 1. A Tale of Love and Darkness by Amos Oz. This would be a reread for me, but the spring after Oz's death, one of the local synagogues in my area, which is DC, also in cahoots with the political organization J Street, did a memorial for Oz, and Politics and Prose, a local store, was there selling some of his books, and I went ahead and I bought it because I read and I loved it. And of course I told myself if I'm going to buy the book, I have to reread it. So here we go. I might be rereading it this month. Next we have book number 2. So I'm going to go sneak along in here. Rich Boy by Sharon Pomerantz. This, I believe, I got from the used library bookstore probably last year around this time, I'm pretty sure. It's a book from the 80s that caught my eye because it is Jewish fiction, and I have a personal niche of reading that is Jewish fiction. So now it's on my shelves, and it might soon be in my hands. And finally, book number 3. Blessings and Curses by Judy Kelly. Okay, this is another book I got a little over a year ago at the Gaithersburg Book Festival, a local book festival, and in fact, this was a book published by one of the beta readers who graciously read my own literary novella, which is now out on submission. And I think there are some similarities between my book and hers, even if just light ones, and I wanted to support her in her work after all she did for me, so now I might be doing that. Anyway, I'll be back soon, possibly with the sky darkening behind me, to read and assess and choose from these 3 books in page 112. Okay, I'm back to read and discuss the page 112s of my 3 hand-picked books, starting with number 1. This is A Tale of Love and Darkness by Amos Oz, which would be a reread for me, and this is the flyer for the event I was talking about earlier. Also, this is a start of a chapter. Chapter 17. He lived for another 20 years after Grandma Shlomit died in her bath. For several weeks or months he continued to get up at daybreak and drag the mattresses and bedclothes to the balcony railing, where he beat them mercilessly to crush any germs or goblins that might have insinuated themselves into the bedding overnight. Perhaps he found it hard to break the habit. Perhaps it was his way of paying his respects to the departed. Perhaps he was expressing his longing for his queen, or perhaps he was afraid of provoking her avenging spirit if he stopped. He did not immediately stop disinfecting the toilet and wash basins either. But slowly, with the passage of time, Grandpa's smiley cheeks grew pink as they had never done before. They always had a cheerful look. Although he remained very particular to his last day about cleanliness and tidiness, being by nature a dapper man, the violence had gone out of him. There were no more furious beatings or frantic sprays of Lysol or chlorine. A few months after Grandma's death, his love life began to blossom in a tempestuous and wonderful way. At about the same time, I have the impression that my 77-year-old grandfather discovered the joy of sex. Before he had managed to wipe the dust of Grandma's burial off of his shoes, Grandpa's home was full of women offering condolences, encouragement, freedom from loneliness, sympathy. They never left him alone, nourishing him with hot meals, comforting him with apple cake, and apparently he enjoyed not letting them leave him alone. He was always attracted to women, all women, both the beautiful ones and those whose beauty other men were incapable of seeing. Women, my grandfather once declared, are all very beautiful. All of them, without exception. Only men, he smiled, are blind, completely blind. No, what? They only see themselves and not even themselves. Blind! I'm going to go ahead and say right now that I definitely find this to be the strongest writing out of the 3 books. Amos Oz is writing what some, including myself, would call a memoir, although he didn't like the term because he was mostly memorializing his parents and his grandparents, it seems, and particularly their time in Israel when they came as immigrants before the founding of the state. And just the way that this is written, you can tell the love and the passion he has for his subjects and for their lives and how they live their lives and even how they find life after grief. It is a beautiful and heart-rending book, and it's a bit of a cheat even to have it here at all, I guess, because I've already read the entire book, and I don't think I want to read it right now anyway. My excuse is that I have some other Amos Oz books on my shelf, and I'm hoping maybe I can read them all together. I definitely want to reread this book because I loved it so much, and that was my excuse for buying it again, but hopefully I can still be okay with putting it off for a little while longer. And here's book number 2, Rich Boy by Sharon Pomerantz. They all stood together, Robert, Zanelli, Goldfarb, Tracy, Cates, Van Dorn, Pascal. They looked more alike now than different, with their long hair, torn jeans, and sloganeering t-shirts, the slogans mostly proclaiming, in endless variation, the importance of individuality. Flyers for the event promised an appearance by someone famous. Peter, Paul, and Mary were rumored to be making a surprise visit. Someone else swore they'd heard it was Courtney Joe and the Fish. But the only musicians who played that afternoon were student musicians, and not very good ones. The sound system malfunctioned, and most of the student speakers, those who could be heard at all, lost their voices from screaming. Meanwhile, the Harvard rowing team glided along the Charles, impervious to the small crowd on the opposite bank. Shoulders squared, oars hitting the water in a tight synchronicity that obliterated individual need, and they looked to Robert as if nothing could touch them. By mid-afternoon, the protest resembled nothing so much as a group of picnickers, sitting on blankets or cardboard signs, eating sandwiches and rolling joints. Robert had fallen that semester under the spell of speed. Marijuana had begun to irritate his breathing, and Quaaludes made him sleepy at a time when he was far too sleepy already. He felt that he had to be on his toes in class, could not afford to be hypnotized by the blowing of a curtain or the lines etched in a desk. He liked the energy of speed, and found that he could go a day without eating if he needed, could write papers with remarkable clarity, had an aesthetic's lack of desire for anything but movement. His thoughts raced, all self-consciousness gone. But that afternoon his heart pounded and his hand shook. "Got anything to calm me down?" he asked Tracy, who was now as generous with his drugs as he had been with his other possessions. "Here," he said, handing Robert a lewd. Then Tracy stood up and looked into the crowd. "Hello, Boston!" he shouted. "Here's my contribution to social equality." He reached into his backpack and threw out handfuls of pills into the bored, stoned crowd. I like this one too. It's pretty narrative heavy, but we get a good sense, I think, of who Robert is in this, that he seems to be some sort of student. He seems to be dealing with a drug addiction and trying to discover what brings him the best sort of high that he wants. And behind that is the backdrop of a protest, although it seems to mostly be a social event. My knowledge of the book, which first of all might not even be accurate, and second of all I shouldn't be thinking about it, is that this takes place in a college community in the 80s. But yeah, my overall assessment of the page is that it flowed easily and got me intrigued about the characters and the situation. And finally, I'm reading page 112 from Blessings and Curses by Judy Kelly. And I should say that this page 112 seems to start in the middle of a piece of dialogue between two characters. His son, Tony, was in the same prison. I wonder if that was planned somehow. Anyway, Tony spent his life in some rundown farmhouse somewhere, and I got the impression that he had to stay inside that farmhouse, that he wasn't allowed to leave. I try to imagine his life, and I can't get Tony and his circumstances out of my mind. We are blessed. I know I'm blessed. Now you want to run a guilt trip on me. No, Kara, I'm just thinking about Tony. Olivia poured coffee for Kara. She took a frozen pizza out of the freezer and stuck it in the oven and then turned on the timer. Olivia took the cup of coffee and started back into the living room. Kara followed her and took a seat on the couch. Olivia placed the cup on the table directly in front of Kara. She watched Kara for a reaction, knowing she always had to be ready for a rebuttal. Kara poured herself another drink instead. Olivia opened the drawer on the end table next to the couch and pulled out a velvet-lined leather box. She took the top off, exposing a book titled Stumbling Through the Woods by Kara Douglas. She took the book out of the box and placed it on the coffee table in front of her sister. She watched as Kara started at the book, as though it were something harmful to the touch, something that was tainted. Sitting next to Kara, Olivia picked up the book and held it like the Bible, and it contained precious proverbs and moral teachings. She moved it in front of Kara, wanting her to take it. Kara sat back on the couch and turned her head away. Take it, Kara. No, I can't. Where did you get this? With the back of her hand, she attempted to wipe the tears from the corners of her eyes. Take it, Kara, take it. No, I can't. I hid this. Where did you get it? You have no right. This is you, Kara. This is who you are. No, that woman, she never was. That woman was someone I wished I was, but I'm not her. Why can't anyone see that? I'm not her. I never was. No, Kara, that's not true. These essays and poems say who you are. They talk about the things that made you, your struggles and loves, just like we all have. Kara moved away from the book. Okay, well, in all honesty, I think there's a little bit of clunkiness to some of the dialogue and the action scene, but I'm still intrigued. I mean, it caught me on a good page after all, where one of the characters is being confronted by her past, basically, that she wants to run from, and it's always good, fun, dramatic times when they're forced to deal with that. I'm also reminded that in the novella that this reader critiqued for me, I also have a character being forced with a box from the past, basically. Not containing her own book, but containing letters between her grandmother and a hated cousin. Anyway, I think I'm going to go for this one, which might make me a bad page 112er because a lot of my reasonings have less to do with what's on the page. I'm intrigued to give this woman a chance because she did so much for me. I'm intrigued about the similarities between our books, and frankly, we're pretty near the end of the month already, and this book is a fair bit shorter than the other two. So that about covers it for me now. You can find links to all of the Goodreads pages for these books down below. You can also find a link to one of the YA booktubers' TBR games, because when I started making these page 112 videos, I thought I'd like to shout out other booktubers, and I've particularly been enjoying the YA booktubers who make up TBR games to deal with their own need or desire for spontaneity in their reading. So this time I think I'm going to highlight one of the first videos series that I found, which is J.D. Ray Reads, who does TBR Trivial Pursuit, and each of the colors of the games coincides to a different genre or age group, and she plays until she fills up her little pie cup. So check her out down below. In the meantime, I seem to have outrun the setting of the sun, but as implied, I have a lot of reading I have left to do before the end of the month, so I might as well get to it, especially since the next time I want to be back on this channel is for Friday Reads, and I'd like to have something to talk about. So thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.